Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Haven't been seeing you online for a while. I apologize for that. I know we reached the end of this week's reading. It's about fasting. Okay. But before that, I want to tell you a story. Okay. It happened. Okay. This will be very useful if you own a car. Okay. You better listen carefully what I said. Okay. So about a year ago, I remember clearly it's July. Some of you will know that I have MPV. When I was waiting at the traffic light, the car started shaking, okay, very mild shaking. And because it is not happening all the time, I didn't see that it is a major issue. But then when the shaking became quite obvious, so I brought it to the car mechanics, okay. Oh, sorry, before that, the car temperature was okay. It's not high. So, but I noticed that when you open up the engine, there is a spare like a water tank, and you need to fill out the water so that your car doesn't get overheat. And I surprisingly the tank is empty, really empty. But then my car temperature is still normal. So as a normal person, I just fill up, the water to the so-called spare water tank. But then the next day, it's dried again. Okay, so again, I just fill it up with more water. And then when I took it to the car mechanic, when I explained to them, they became very worried. So they started to diagnose, do some checking, and lo and behold, they say you are in very big, serious problem. I said, what happened? He said, your car engine, the gasket is burnt. What does it mean? I say, meaning you need to change your whole engine. I say, why, or how do you come to that conclusion? I'm trying to save money. The MPV engine is very expensive. They say, look, so they open up the engine. See, there is traces of water in your engine. Okay, what happened? They say is when the engine gasket got burnt, okay, it will try to draw water. So the more water you draw, the more water that you fill at the water tank, the more water it will draw. So in a sense, there is water in your car engine, and the whole engine. So seriously, the problem became bigger and bigger. Okay, so why I want to tell you this, and why is it got to do with fasting? Okay, I'll tell you at the end of this sharing. So moral of the story is please don't sign off and stay until the end of this sharing. Yeah, it's a very hard lesson for me because it cost me a bomb, and to get an engine change endorsed by JPJ, that is also a very big headache. Yeah, when you come to day, I can give you consultation. Okay, you just have to buy me a drink lah. They'll tell you how to get it done. But it's really a very painful experience. Okay, now back to today's sharing. Somebody asked me to share on Isaiah 58. Even as we began the week of reading Being with Jesus on Isaiah 58, because this person shared with me, can you share on Isaiah 58 from a different perspective? Okay, so if you have Isaiah 58 opened in front of you, okay, there are 14 verses. Maybe we can take turn to read together. Each one probably take 3 verses.
Okay, Isaiah 58 verse 1. Shout it aloud, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the house of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right, and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit or your workers.
Fasting ends in quarreling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed, or for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this kind of fasting I've chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, and to break every yoke?
Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer you. You will cry for help, and he will say, "Here I am." You do not do away with the yoke of oppression, with the finger pointing and malicious talk.
If you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. You shall be like watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Those who are among you shall build the old waste place. You shall raise up the foundation of many generations, and you shall be called the reaper of the beach,
Like
restorer
Shih.
of street.
You turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Lord honorable. If you honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
Okay, so today my focus is on Isaiah 58, and I put here verse 3. God said, "You are fasting to please yourself." Okay, what happened is when we look at Isaiah 58, okay, and I specifically want to start at verse 2 onwards. Okay, when I read around, okay, and listened to some of the sermons, there's something what they call Christian nowadays, okay, spiritual hypocrisy. Okay, now I found that word is too harsh, okay, for some, but let us just so-called read and expound on this further. Yeah. So I will just take out verse 2 and verse 3. Okay. When they say yet, again, I'm using the NLT versions. Okay. Some of you may be using other. In the NLT version, okay, yet they act so pious. From the reading just now, okay, I can list down, okay, how do they act pious? They come to temple every day and they seem delighted to learn from me, meaning God. They act like a righteous nation that will never abandon the law of his God. And they ask God to take action on their behalf, and they pretend and wanting to be near God. Okay? And they also question God at verse 3. They claim they have fasted before God, and yet they ask God, why aren't you impressed with their fasting? And they're very hard on themselves. The NKJV version used the term, they afflicted their souls when they fasted, and yet they told God, you didn't even take notice of it. Now, I try to paraphrase this because when we read this, we need to understand the situations, okay, the Israelites were in. at the time, but I try to paraphrase it to our today's applications, just based on verse 2 and verse 3. Okay. I'm not trying to accuse, I'm not trying to judge, I'm not trying to criticize. By even when I read, when I try to understand even how to relate to today's world, today's church settings, the way I try to summarize verse 2 and verse 3 is, yet they act so holy. When we look at Christians or people of God today, they attend church every week and they seem listening attentively to every sermon. They act righteously by following what is written in the Bible. They appeal to God. They want God to listen by participating in prayer rally, prayer gathering, and they pretend to be wanting to be near God. And sometimes when Christians fasted, they participated in fasting program, okay? But they will lament and ask God, why aren't we getting your attentions? And they push to the extreme, to the limit during fasting. And again, they lamented their prayer is not being answered, and God didn't intervene in the circumstances they are in. So this again is reminding myself sometimes, are we at a stage of spiritual hypocrisy sometimes when we think we are fasting, when we think we are doing things according to what God has commanded us to do, but are we on the right path? Do we have the right heart? Okay, so again, I just want to re-emphasize, it is a point of reflections for all of us. I'm not here to judge, I'm not here to accuse, I'm not here to be critical, but based on just these two verses, I hope this will stir up or spur up something. What these two verses are telling us, even in our act of worship, in the act of fasting, does Isaiah 58 verse 3 sometimes hit us that we are doing this for our own selves? So what wasn't right in Isaiah 58? Okay, the people fasted, they gave up craving of physical need in return for assistance from the spiritual. So they fasted in the hopes of blessing and God's intervention. However, they never turned from their wicked way. We can look at verse 3, because they still continue to oppress others, and they continue to have quarrel and infightings. That's why in verse 4, God, through Isaiah, was telling them, this kind of fasting will never get you anywhere with God. So it is an experience, the desire and experience with God. Okay, we talk about vertical and inward kind of relationship without touching other people's life. We're talking about horizontal relationship or outward. So in a nutshell, when we come to this part of Isaiah 58, it is again time of reflections for many of us. Do we get the vertical and the horizontal relationship aligned together? You see, when we fast, okay, because we want to have a deeper relationship with God, but then God wants us not just being a recipient only. through our fast, through our desire, through our so-called our interceding, okay, need for other people, God wants the blessing to flow through us to the people surrounding us, instead of what is stated in verse 3 or verse 4, oppressing other people, and yet not just that, continue to have quarrel and infightings. Now, what is the kind of fasting that God's desire? Okay, I list down 8 there. This is basically found in verse 6 and 7. Free the Ronin imprisoned, lighten the burden of workers, release the oppressed, remove the chain, share food, give shelter, give clothes, don't hide from those in need. What I have done is, on the right hand side, okay, when we talk about free those wrongly in prison, we are talking about justice. Lighten the burden of workers, those who are on-boss employers. Okay, you need to practice good employer ethics. It is basically a witness. Release the oppressed, to be compassionate. Remove the chain, those who are poor, those who are downtrodden. We intercede and we intervene for them. Share food, it is about charity. Giving shelter, it is about protection. See, shelter, it is not just about the roof over the top. It is basically prepare a place that is safe to protect those who are, in need. Giving food, it is about warmth. Don't hide from those in need. It is about generosity. Okay, so when we look at this, okay, one thing that struck in my mind is this is what Jesus is here for, because it is stated already in Luke 4, verse 18 and 19, and in Matthew 25, 35 and 36. So, in a way, Jesus is reminding the people at that time again the kind of fasting desired by God. It is not just about receiving, it is about giving and sharing and do what is necessary so that the blessing of God can be channeled from the believers to those people surrounding them. And that is the kind of fasting desired by God. How do we apply? Okay. Fasting is from the heart, and it is not just purely depending on abstaining from food. Okay, we know there are different kinds of fast. Some say from the movie, some say from handphone. There are all kinds of so-called types of fast people talk about nowadays. It is not just fasting alone on the physical need, but it's really from the heart, because that will really touch on the part of our relationship with God. When we read in the earlier part, verse 2 and verse 3, it is really about a deepening relationship with God when we fast. And we also talk about self-discipline. When we look at verse 9, okay? Now the reason this person asked me to share, because Isaiah 58 in this season of time, it is reminding this person, am I controlling my tongue even though I am fasting? Am I pointing fingers at others though I want to be as near to God as possible through fasting? So the application is, it is really about personal growth. Once we have a good vertical relationship with God, God wants us to grow. God wants us to have self-discipline. And the last thing is pointing to God, meaning drawing people to Jesus when we fast. It is basically our testimony. It is beyond our personal growth. When we have grown, we want to be a so-called a good witness to share the testimony with other people, so that through our act of fasting, we can point people to God. We can draw people to Jesus. Because it is in verse 10, okay, if you quickly look at verse 10, that your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. When we fast, ultimately we want blessing of God to come to us. But I believe Isaiah 58, it is reminding us, it is not blessing comes to us. It is the blessing from God will flow through us to the others. And that is God's desire. So it is about we being the benefactor rather than we being the beneficiary. Others should be the beneficiary of blessings, but we are the benefactor so that the blessings can be flow through us to other people. This is what God has promised in verse 9 to 12. That if we align ourselves with God, if our heart is aligned with God, that He will answer our prayer when we call Him. He will protect us from behind. He will give us guidance continuously. He will give us provision, and He will restore our strength. And He will give us abundance of life. As you see on the picture on the right, it's like a spring of water, whose water do not fail. And He promised us there will be healing of wounds when He talk about restoration of ruined city walls. And He will be our delight. Okay. So I hope through this simple sharing, even as we conclude the whole week of reading about fasting, that it is not just about us, it is about God's desire for us when we fast, so that others can also receive the blessing of God through our act of fast. I come to the end. Now I go back to, you must be wondering, what does today's sharing has to do with my car, my car engine. Suddenly it dawned on me. You see, a car engine is designed so that only lubricants, okay, can drive it. The minute there is impurity, meaning that in my case, water started to come into the car, the engine won't be able to function properly anymore. And until one day, like I said, the engine needs to be replaced because this is not what it is designed and built for. So it is reminding myself also, sometimes in our life, okay, there are situations or issues when impurity started to come into our life. And yet we continue on the motions because we thought this is what is best is supposed to be. But yet, lo and behold, we didn't know that this is not what God wants us to do. Just carry on the motion as usual. God wants us to participate in His work. Yes, fasting is important. Fasting will draw our attention from worldly craving to God. But God doesn't want it to stop there. God wants us to continue to work together with Him so that we will be able to become a benefactor rather than a beneficiary. So the same thing like my car. At the end of the day, because I can continue to drive it without knowing that there is already water, which is impurity. And if I continue to do that, okay, it will be catastrophic. So again, in conclusions, it is like a reminding to myself, okay, is God pleased with my fasting? Is this what he wants me to do when I fast? Okay, so thank you for listening, and I hope after this, like I say, when your car is shaking, you better give it to the mechanics to give a good check. Thank you. So over to you, Pastor.